Hey, it's Gerald from Lakers Fast Break. Anchor is the easiest way to make your next podcast. It's absolutely free, and their creation tools will allow you to record and edit your show right from your phone or your home computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on great podcast outlets like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started on your next podcast. And we're back with another episode of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from Lakers Fast Break, Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports Fantasy Football, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows. And if you can, please give us that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or if you can like, subscribe, follow, anything you can do on your podcast app, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, or any of the other tens of thousands seemingly podcast catchers that are out there. We just truly appreciate you listening to our show and cannot thank you enough for doing so. And if you got an NBA, basketball, or Lakers fan in your life that you want to go ahead and have them check out, please do so. Please suggest our show. We'd be indebted to you if you could. Well, it's another great episode I've got on tap for you. I want to go ahead and thank you again for listening. He's back one more time. You got to go ahead and check out his great experience known as NBA Draft Junkies. You start off with the great site, NBADraftJunkies.com. You head into his awesome YouTube page, which breaks down all the latest goings on with the NBA Draft with detailed analysis of picks, mock drafts, breakdowns of the actual prospects themselves on NBA Draft Junkies on YouTube. And then, for your listening pleasure, you can now check out his podcast available on Anchor, Spotify, and so many different outlets. That's NBA Draft Junkies as well. It is a good man indeed. It's an experience, my friend, now in NBA Draft Junkies with you, Rafael Barlowe. And Rafael, thanks for coming back on.
No problem. I never thought of it as an experience, but I'll accept it. I'll take it as that.
Well, it's just, I have to go ahead and say it. I was saying it to another friend of mine because you got all these things going on in your life, and you got all these things that people can check out. It's no longer just this or that. It's a whole embodiment of all the great work that you're going ahead and putting into it.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to be able to reach people in as many different platforms as possible. There's some people that are going to prefer YouTube. There's some people who may like to just read on the website. And then I think just adding the podcast was just a no-brainer for me. And it's been inspired by you, just listening to the podcast or just getting the notifications on my phone and seeing my name on there. It's kind of pushed me to do something that I had been wanting to do.
Well, I mean, it's awesome to hear, but that's a credit to yourself. I mean, you got to go ahead. You sound awesome every time you're on the show, and I'll tell you what, anytime I can get anybody into podcasting, it always brings a little bit of special place in my heart because I have, over the 10 years plus I've been doing this, have been able to at least talk to people about trying a podcast. And they, for the most part, they found it enjoyable and a worthwhile experience. So
wow, I mean, 10 years in podcasting you must have got in right before it really, really just, I shouldn't say must have. You did get in before it really blew up. Now it seems like everybody has a podcast.
Exactly. It's about 2009, I think, was my first podcast. I really didn't get into it. We were never on a set schedule doing it for years, just, about maybe 150 over the course of like 5 years, but never just really getting into a schedule and things of that nature until, the latter half of the decade. And that's something I will always regret. Like you said, 2009, I could have gotten into it so much more, and I could have been the Joe Rogan. You never know. Spotify could have paid me $100 million.
$100 million is a lot of money to talk if you think about it. But it just shows that, I mean, we all for the most part, have the capabilities of creating our own platforms. And there's somebody that may have an interest. I'm sure that when you came out with yours, somebody probably thought like, how are you going to talk about the Lakers year round or talk about whatever? But it shows that there are people who will listen, and there's billions of people in the world who need some form of entertainment. So I wish I would have gotten earlier, but I'm here now. So now that I've joined the podcast world, I plan on producing a lot of content.
That's awesome.
Got to make up for lost time.
Yes, got to make up for lost time indeed. But you got to check out what he's doing today. Just type in NBA Draft Junkies, and you'll be glad you did. But my friend, there's so much to talk about on today's show. Wanted to go ahead and, I know you're hearing the rumors. I know you're seeing on Twitter the Shams Charania, the Adrian Wojnarowskis. They're sending out all the notes to the owners, their proposals. Adam Silver's trying to coordinate it with Orlando. I'm sorry to my friends in Las Vegas here. Unfortunately, Orlando looks more and more like the place that's going to be happening. And it looks like it may be happening. I'm not confirming anything yet, but it may be happening around the end of July as far as an NBA season being picked up once again in some form or fashion in Orlando, in the ESPN world of sports that's there, the complex that they have there. I think there's 3 arenas that they have. They're going to go ahead and separate between practice facilities and actual game places and actual places for them to play games. Not going to be as many as Las Vegas, but they're in an area where they can, as I was saying with Laker Tom earlier this week, they can go ahead and have a place. I don't want to say control. I did say control on the show, but I think a place where they can go ahead and manage things better as far as because of this pandemic. And I understand Jared Dudley from the Lakers and some of the comments that he's made about being in like a jail or type deal, but you're talking about a pandemic, man. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I mean, there's no 100% right answer, but being in a facility like Orlando, there's just no, the reason why they're doing it there is because they can better, have a better outlook, have a better idea exactly how to control the virus. This is all about controlling the virus and limiting the amount of people who get infected. So exactly what are you supposed to do?
I don't know. I mean, if you look at social media from this current weekend, it looks like there are some people have declared the pandemic is over. Like I've seen the videos or pictures of Ozarks this weekend. I've seen like videos of pool parties. So it looks like there's some people who have just said, you know what, it's over. I don't care. Then there also are people who are still playing it safe. Then there's people who are, I don't know, it's just tough. There are people who are going to get haircuts and going to the salons and getting their nails done. And to them, it feels essential. I mean, it's just a great divide as far as the topic of what we should do, So, and at the end of the day, it's all money motivated. Yeah. So even with the NBA, this is motivated by the fact that they have to play over 70 games for the TV money. And then I even read that like Chris Paul on his paycheck on the 15th, it was short like $400,000. So even though he's made hundreds of millions of dollars, he probably doesn't want to keep having $400K reduced from his check, because if he got that taken out of his check on the 15th, then that means the one coming up on the 1st, it's going to be the same thing. And then June 15th. So now he's out of $1.2 million. So I think that people are just, well, I should just say it like this. It's all money motivated. And it's kind of iffy that people are choosing money over health or so on. So I would, in my opinion, I would really love to see if they were to ask each player individually off the record, do they want to play or do they want to just get the season over? What would the answers be?
That's a good question, my friend. A lot of great questions are being asked at this point in time. Mm-hmm. There is no 100% right answer in all this that's going on. There's no 100% right answer either which way. And there's people on definitive both sides, as I've seen on your social media and I've seen on my social media and seen on all of our social medias. People are on like both sides doesn't matter what divide you are, it doesn't matter left or right or anything like that nature. Just people are so definitive in their answers on which way we should go. But the ultimate thing is there is no 100% right answer. If you go for the side of health or if you go for the side of economy. So there's just no way to go ahead and be 100% right. You're going to sacrifice either which way. I mean, my wife works at a hospital that I take her to several days a week to go work at, where she is at risk of her life every single time that she goes there. And she hears about how many people have checked into the hospital and things of that nature. So it's not slowing down. It may be slowing down in some parts. It's rising in others. We're hearing stories of one and the other and one and the other. Is it spiking? Is it not spiking? It's just there is no right answer when all comes down to it. And when it comes to the players and the league, I mean, they're only trying to do what's best, Adam Silver, for, yes, the money aspect, but also for the health and the aspect of the players. So It's not coming down to something where he wants them to willingly go ahead and put them in a controlled environment. He's not trying to go ahead and make it out like an imprisonment type deal, but it is something that these players have to be cognizant about as far as, okay, I want to go ahead and sneak out and go to Disney World or do this or do that and come back and put the other players' health in jeopardy. It's seemingly, there is no right answer. And it just, like you said before, it's just everybody just has these so definitive ideas on what they should be doing. And I don't know, it's just such a weird time, and there's really no 100% right answer.
Correct. And I've been trying to keep up with it across the world, just from the different basketball leagues. And China still hasn't started back up. And they were originally, I think they called their players back March 1st. Yeah. And they're still not playing. And some of the teams have actually allowed their American players to come back home to the States. While I know there's a couple of teams, I know the Beijing Ducks, they still have their players there in China. And so I haven't talked to anybody in a while about it, but I know that they're still looking to try to get their season started. But just in China alone, there's an area in the northeastern part of the country where they have 100 million people that they put back on lockdown.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. And then I know Israel is looking to start back up, and they wanted their players to report back on like May 18th. And I think there's a few of them that still haven't came back yet. And then this week coming up, and I think it's maybe tomorrow, so Monday the 27th, there's going to be a big meeting about whether or not they should cancel or keep playing with the EuroLeague season.
Yeah, and I tell you what, it's just something that, again, nobody's 100% wrong in this whole scenario, but you got to understand there's an issue of public health, and there's also an issue of people's livelihoods, and we should be respectful of both ideals as we move forward on this. But again, as you know, in our society right now, it's not always the most civil thing in the world.
Yep, I agree.
I'll tell you, it's just such a wacky time, but it is looking more and more like in about 8 to 10 weeks that there will be games being played, and which means that a lot of these players, now that practice facilities are open, they're starting to work out. And as somebody who is or has been working out players in the league and players in other leagues, not only NBA, but G League, European, all over the world, what do they need to focus on? Because as you and I both have seen over the course of our many years, especially me, many years, watching sports, we've seen where people rush back too quickly as far as their rehabilitation or as far as the exercise and things that they do in the off season, and they end up injuring themselves and hurting their team much more than what they would have done before. So what process are you suggesting, or would you suggest to those players and how they go about their regimen as they go ahead and gear up towards a possible restarting of the season? Like I said, most likely, if the rumors hold true, around the end of July.
This is a tough question, simply because I don't think we have anything to really compare it to. For example, if it were training camp, let's say it was, September 1st, and we're starting training camp, usually guys, even if they don't do anything all summer, they start preparing in August. So they may ramp up their workouts, and then even after they've ramped up their workouts, they may get into some 5-on-5 action. And so you may have a month before training camp, and then you may have 2 weeks of training camp, and then they start playing games, and then you may have 2 weeks of preseason, and then the season starts. So that's, at least 8 weeks. And so I don't even know if they're going to have 8 weeks. And then as of today, I think there are 11 teams that haven't opened their facilities yet. So no matter how hard you train, even if a player has had access to a gym like a Mike Conley and he's been working out every day, you still can't simulate 5-on-5.
Yeah.
You can't simulate being bumped coming off of pin downs. You can't simulate boxing out or anything like that. So it's going to be tough. But if I were in charge of working out a player, I think the first thing I would do is just make sure they're getting up shots and just getting their rhythm back, ball handling. But even then, that's going to be tough simply because it seems like teams are still going to do a little bit of social distancing, like 2 or 3 players at a time in the gym. So you got 15 guys on the roster. You're spreading that out over hours. And then I read that the traveling parties of the teams are going to be reduced to from 50 to 33. So, I mean, could you imagine Popovich out there having to rebound or pass? I mean, with the reduced staff, that's going to happen. So this is just a very weird time that we don't really have anything to compare it to. So,
yeah, this is definitely a different time than any other that you and I have ever experienced. We're going to have to wait and see. I mean, I'm just worried there's going to be a lot of hamstring injuries because that's something you and I have seen before, especially after the strike seasons for both the NBA and NFL. I saw a lot of hamstrings because the way that they stretch out maybe seems to it just maybe forgotten about or maybe not done well enough because they're just seems to be hamstrings seem to be the first thing that I see most common after these type of breaks.
Yeah, hamstring, groin. But even then, what makes the situation so different, and let's say it was a lockout shortened season. You're preparing for a whole season or half a season, but you have a fresh start. In this case, you don't even have a fresh start. You're playing for, let's just get these 20 games over. If you're like a bad team, like if you're the Hawks or the Cavs, you're playing just to finish out the season. So what motivation do you really have? And if you're not necessarily motivated, you may not be training for, like you would if you had a full season ahead of you or a half season or a 0-0 record. So I think that could be something that can be tough because guys may not take it serious because they're just thinking like, well, I'm getting in shape and I'm preparing just to play for 2 weeks and then I'm off again.
Yeah. Like I said, we will see, but it's going to take a while. I think it'll be over. I remember one time earlier we were talking about maybe a 25-day type of training camp. I think it's going to necessitate being a little bit longer for them before they get the season started. I think it's, what'd you say, a 30 to 45 day would probably be even more sufficient?
Again, I don't know because I think even if it's 25 days, guys are going to get tired of playing against the same guys for 25 days. So they're going to want to, get up and down the court and play and get started. So I really don't know. But I do know that at least in Texas, I'm in Dallas, the gyms have opened up in Texas. And so guys are starting to get back to the gyms and work out. Maybe as far as like strength and conditioning workouts more than basketball, but people are starting to try to slowly get back into the groove of things.
Well, we'll see what happens, my friend. It's a lot we're going to be talking about over the coming weeks as the NBA gets closer to a definitive answer. Whether or not it's going to be in late July, we'll have to wait and see, but it is looking more and more that direction. I mean, they're polling the different owners, asking them about their thoughts on how to best to continue the season, and we'll see what scenarios that there are. And of course, at Orlando, that facility that's there with a different, I guess, 3 different arenas, and they're going to have how they're going to separate the courts and all that. We'll hear more in the coming weeks how they're going to do it right here at the Lakers Fast Break. We're signaling the ref for a quick timeout, but we'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
I see the potential for basically like another Netflix kind of paradigm shift where here comes this other major player. They have a ton of resources. Apple could change the way that entertainment is consumed.
They say it's the only time this year that you'll have stars from each brand battling each other, and we know it's not going to be the case, but they like to say that, and more power to them, I guess.
Well, it's a big first step, bringing all those superheroes together. There were definitely some parts of the movie that I really enjoyed, and then there were some parts that I thought just kind of fell short of expectation.
Part of it has to be something to do with how it's being promoted, and this is a thing where audiences do not agree with critics.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse, every week on Apple Podcasts.
And over a dozen of your favorite streaming and podcasting options. But when they get back on the court, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, I'm going to go on to next time we talk about the Western Conference and your thoughts on that, because that's even a little bit more. There's 2 teams that really could be battling there in the Western Conference. But the Eastern Conference, it's been definitively the Bucks this season.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone out there that you think has a chance to do it? Because I think right now, when it comes down to it, in this type of scenario, and you're not in front of a home crowd, and you're not necessarily on a road game per se, and I'm using that in quotations here, in this type of scenario, we could see a lot of different things happening in an NBA playoff scenario. So your thoughts on an Eastern Conference, could it be a little bit more tight as far as the maybe top 3, top 4 teams than we might think?
Yeah, I don't know if at this point that you can really have a clear-cut favorite, because everybody's chemistry is going to be thrown off. People's rhythm may be off. You just never know. I feel like if the regular season had ended normally, then I would say the Bucks would be my favorite. I think Boston was playing well right before the season ended. And Toronto, on paper, Toronto may not look like a threat, but they were second in the East. They're second in the East as of today. So I don't know if I could really figure out which team is a clear-cut favorite. Let's just say if Giannis is rusty, that totally puts Milwaukee in a tough situation. Or if as of now, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. But what if Brooklyn gets KD and Kyrie back? Then they could end up being a threat. I think they're a playoff team as of today. I think they're like the 7th or 8th seed. But that could really just kind of throw the whole conference off if KD comes back. I think Ben Simmons should be healthy for Philly now because he was out. I think he was out before they played.
Yeah.
Or even let's just say, a guy like Embiid, who people have questioned his health or his, him being in game shape. What if he just really comes back in either A, great game shape, or B, totally out of shape?
You never know with him.
You never really know. Oladipo, he wasn't fully healthy when he came back, but this has given him more time to get in shape. And Indiana I think they could be a dangerous team. And actually right now, if the season were to start right now with the seeding, Indiana is ahead of Philly. So you'd have a Miami, Indiana playoff series and a Boston, Philadelphia in the first round. If you're not in shape for that series, it's going to be, just the public backlash is going to be tough because
it would be tough. And I think though that if Philadelphia were to be fully healthy, I think they have a chance to really come out of it as the number 2, or meeting up against whoever it is that's going to be matching up against it with them. Most likely would be Milwaukee, although we'll have to wait and see where that matches up. I think Philadelphia could really take advantage of this situation. Brooklyn could as well, but Brooklyn has been very set on saying, hey, KD is not going to be a part of this season. I don't know. As it extends and he feels better, it's going to be very hard to keep him off the court if he truly wants to be there.
Yeah, which, I mean, by the time the season starts, it's going to be a full calendar year since the injury. And, I mean, has anybody missed a full calendar year with a torn Achilles? I mean, I think Wesley Matthews came back in like 8 or 9 months. So right before the season ended, I mean, there were a lot of videos. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there were videos surfacing of KD playing, and he looked good. I mean, of course, you can't simulate basketball shape, like I said, and, you know, there's nobody playing physical defense on them. But I wonder if this were an Olympic year, well, which it is, but if they were still having the Olympics and the season ended at its normal time and Brooklyn was finished in April, would KD have played in the Olympics?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And so if you say, well, yeah, I think he would have played, then that means he could probably play in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And same with Klay Thompson also, even though we'll talk about the West at another time. So I think that could really just kind of throw things off in the East.
It could. It very well could. And it's something I would like to see. I would like to, if KD can come back, if he's healthy, I think he should be allowed to play. I don't think it should be, it doesn't serve any purpose him sitting more on the sidelines if he's ready to go and play 5-on-5 basketball, because it's just going to help him get into shape. And any contribution he can make for you now, that's not pushing it or overextending it like what we saw last year in the middle of the finals, because that was the NBA finals, and he clearly was not ready at 100%. But if he is now, then there's no reason why, even if the Brooklyn just gets eliminated in the first round, just the game action for him would go a long way to helping him towards what we're going to see next season.
Yeah, because if the season starts in July-ish, which means it's probably going to end in late August, maybe early September.
Yeah.
Then the next season won't start until Christmas is what we're hearing. So KD would be out like 18 months without playing if he doesn't come back. That's a pretty long time. I mean, I guess for his purpose, he may say, well, at least I know I'm 100%. But it just seems like he's going to be out a whole full calendar year if he doesn't finish out this season.
And that would be rough next year. I mean, you want to get some of the rust off. I mean, it's not going to – if it is an extended playoff run for Brooklyn that he's a part of, then you're wiping off a lot of the rust off of him. But if you're only going to go ahead and allow him to play let's say what Tom suggested, what we're hearing mostly, that it would be a Christmas start, I mean, that's a long time. That's a long time for anyone, KD, LeBron, or anybody to be out that long a time and expect them to be anywhere near as sharp coming that part of the season.
And for personal reasons or selfishly, I hope he does come back. And I'm not sure where Kyrie's at in his rehab, but I would like to see both of them come back. That would add a little bit more drama and excitement to this crazy situation that we're going through. And if Brooklyn is the 7th seed and they play Toronto in the first round, I think that'd be an interesting matchup. I think we're all going to watch basketball anyway due to lack of options, but I think it would just add a little bit more to the games. So I personally hope him and Kyrie can come back. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's possible, but I think it would be good basketball to have on TV.
It would be good for the league. And it would also be, money-wise, obviously, when it comes down to it, we were talking about earlier, money, but it would just be good for the league and gain interest. It would gain interest beyond that first watch. I mean, everybody would go ahead and want to watch that first game back, but it's what you do after that first game to sustain an audience. And having KD and Kyrie back, having Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons at 100%, having the individuals that, let's say like even just a few games with Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry back once again, playing a couple games together, just would create enough interest. Just to have that back would would go a long way to help solidifying the NBA once again, because we've seen over the course before the coronavirus hit the ratings were down for the league overall.
Yeah. Even though I kind of have my suspicions about that simply because I don't know if they're really factoring in the fact that people are cutting the cord and more people are watching online than they are on TV. So, I mean, the ratings may be down, but I don't think interest in basketball is down. I just think people are finding different ways to watch it.
You know, I'm hopeful that the NBA will go ahead and make the right decisions, and we will get to see basketball once again in late July. And hopefully with that as well, we can see players like KD, Kyrie, and so many other players that have been injured or were questionable at that point in time when the league stopped. We can hopefully see them play once again and finish out the season strong, or as strong as you can under those circumstances.
Totally agree.
Well, once again, I'm on with my good friend Rafael Barlowe from NBA Draft Junkies. You got to check out his entire experience, including his podcast, his YouTube channel, and his great site, NBADraftJunkies.com. You got to go ahead and check it out just by typing in the words NBA Draft Junkies.
Hi, this is Mr. Holiday from the podcast My Worst Holiday, and you're listening to the Lakers Fast Break podcast.
Hey listener, Dutch here from Voice from the Underground, the podcast. My co-host and I want to invite you to check out our little corner of the podcast verse. At Voice from the Underground, we talk about all the crazy happening around us and try to make a little bit of sense out of the nonsense with little to no results. If the idea of hearing three semi-intelligent, outspoken nerds talk about politics, social issues, current events, sports, movies, pretty much anything that we decide to talk about because, well, it's our show, appeals to you, grab your shovel and come on down to the underground, and then consult a qualified psychotherapist. Find us wherever you get your podcasts, just not where you buy your weed.
Voice from the Underground.
Well, my friend, speaking of NBA Draft Junkies, you have a great video there on your YouTube page about Euro players not getting enough love from, fans out here. And we've seen this over the course of the past few years about when European players are drafted, that the player, because these fans don't know them or they haven't studied up on them, they go ahead and automatically reject them. I mean, Kristaps Porzingis, I think, is probably the poster child for this all to happen when he got vociferously booed out of the building when he was drafted by the Knicks. And, well, we've seen where that went from there. I mean, he's been a great player when he's not injured, and even though he's not on the Knicks now, he still is a player that was very worthy of his draft position. So I want to hear your thoughts, if you can expound them. First, people, if you can, after you listen to our show here, please, if you can, check out his great video on his YouTube page on the specific subject. But I want to hear you expound your thoughts even more as far as why European players don't get enough love in the NBA draft.
Well, in my opinion, a lot of it is just directly related to the average fan being unfamiliar with the players. And the question I proposed on my channel was, if Killian Hayes grew up in the States and we were familiar with him from his AAU background, and LaMelo Ball grew up in France or Germany or whatever, and would the views be different? I feel like LaMelo, in my opinion, I have Killian Hayes over LaMelo, and that's just my opinion. But it's just a huge gap or divide between how most people feel about the two players. Well, I think if you ask NBA personnel or people that scout, the gap isn't as wide as it is among the fans.
I mean, you got to listen to some of these shows, and these shows that gap is getting a lot narrower and narrower between Killian Hayes and LaMelo Ball.
Right. But the fans, it's huge. It's a humongous divide, and I think it all just goes into LaMelo's a name that we've been familiar with for years. He's kind of been in the basketball spotlight for like the last 5 years. I mean, we literally saw him grow up. We've seen him when he played at Chino Hills. We saw, when he went to Lithuania, Australia. We've seen him grow up. I mean, having a Facebook channel and a brother and a dad that, precedes you helps a lot. But in my opinion, I just think, I like Killian Hayes a little better, a little bit more than I like LaMelo. But I got a lot of flack on my YouTube page and emails when I had Hayes going number 2 on my mock draft and LaMelo going number 5. So that's why I proposed the question. But it's not new. It's kind of like even with Luke, I remember when he first came out, you heard all the talks of he's too slow.
Not athletic enough.
Athletic enough. Then there were I just felt like a lot of it was nitpicking. Like I remember there was one article came out, and I want to say it was from a pretty well-known, reputable website or whatever. And the article says something like, Luka Doncic won't work out for any teams. So then I started seeing all the comments, oh, he's scared. And I remember telling people, well, the reason he's not working out is because he's still in season. Like the European season, the EuroLeague ends in probably mid-May, but you still have your domestic leagues that don't end until mid-June. And I want to say in the case of the ACB, late June. So, and I think that particular year, his season ended. He won the championship in the Spanish league, and he had to fly right from that last game to the draft. But the perception was, he's scared. He's not going to show up and work for teams. And then they were also had articles saying that he hasn't declared for the draft yet. And I'm like, it's mid-season. Like, even though college players, we assume they're coming out, you've never seen, at least I don't recall seeing a college player say, I'm declaring for the draft in December. It's just a distraction during the season. But I just feel like there's a media bias going on, and they were doing little things to just kind of like pick at him and question his heart, question his toughness. Comparisons to Darko, and I just feel like it's unfair. I feel that if a guy goes to Duke and he doesn't pan out as an NBA player, he's considered a bust. We don't consider the next Duke player to be a bust. While I think European players will always be compared to the guys who didn't make it as opposed to the ones who did.
Yeah, for every, as you were saying, Darko Milicic and Nicholas
Skilishvili,
yes. That's a name that will always live in my brain, even though I can't say it properly. About their failures, you always forget about the others who have succeeded. Just in Dallas, you have one of the greatest players of all time that played for the Mavericks. It's just people were talking about him. He was drafted 7th, 8th, I think, and he was like flip flop between Robert Tractor Trailer, I think, in that trade to get Nowitzki.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's
but even like other guys, like I want to say, when you talk about guys being compared to your European players, and maybe I guess it's unfair to bring up the race thing, but I never hear about Rudy Gobert. Like you never hear like a big being compared to a Rudy Gobert or even Giannis. Giannis was the MVP. Luka was Rookie of the Year. Gobert was Defensive Player of the Year. These
never
are all
heard a thing.
European players. So you never hear about that. You still hear about Darko, Skilishvili, Jan Vesely, a few other guys. You hear about Bender, but you never hear about, like I say, Rudy Gobert. Nick Batum has had a good career. Evan Fournier, I think, is, he's not an all-star, but he's going to play 13 to 15 years and be a high rotation guy. He's been good. There's other guys like Siakam. Embiid.
It is what you're saying. It is.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to say it. I know I don't want to say it, but it's there. It's just as plain as day. You could say it's not there, but it is there. The only time that those players ever got comparisons when it comes to the draft is, okay, let's say like a Chad Ford or somebody at that point in time was saying Giannis Antetokounmpo to me plays like X player or things of that nature, but it doesn't stay with them like these other players, and it doesn't stay with them like we've seen from these failures, because most of these failures that are memorialized or remembered by us in draft history seem to be of one race over the other.
Yeah, it's just...
there's a common theme. There's a common thread.
A common theme, because Giannis, I don't hear his name ever brought up as being a European player. He is... we call him the Greek freak. We know that he's he represents Greece. But when you hear about European player, and you just don't hear about him. Like I say, you hear about the guys that didn't make it. And then I also think that sometimes if you are an international player, if you played in the U.S. high school system or you went to college in the States, then you just kind of lumped into being an American. Like DeAndre Ayton is from the Bahamas, I believe, or Buddy Hield. Those guys aren't necessarily Americans. They can't represent the U.S. in international play, but because we're familiar with them and they went to Arizona and OU, they don't get thrown into the whole non-American box that other guys have been put in.
Same thing with Puerto Rican, if correct. If there's a Puerto Rican superstar, could he represent the country or no? That's the thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I don't even think
because they usually have their own representation.
Yeah, they have their own team. I guess most Barea would never make one of the U.S. teams. But even like Karl Anthony Towns, if I'm not mistaken, he can't represent the U.S. because he played for the Dominican team.
Yeah,
I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. So I don't think he can ever represent the U.S.
It's just like you said. It's there. I mean, you want to go ahead and skirt around it, but it's there. And yes, most of the high-profile failures are of a certain ethnic origin. That comes to European players, but overall, like I said, when it comes down to your thoughts were really just spot on the subject. And, European players as a whole, whether of any race, it's seemingly they don't get enough love, period, when it comes to Denny Avdija, for instance. Let's go ahead and talk about him. I mean, if he gets picked, a great percentage of the NBA fans out there from, let's say, the U.S. primarily are probably going to say, who is that? And he's going to be, and he's been really high on your list. I think you've had him close to your, if not right there at your top 5, right there on the 5, 6 area. And for some other people as well, I've seen him fluctuate here and there, but he's someone very high up on your list. But people are going to say, who in the heck's that if he gets drafted that high up?
Yeah, I have him going to the Knicks. So as you can imagine, Knicks fans are just on my neck. He's terrible. Why? Didn't you guys learn from 2015? It wasn't that long ago. But I get it. New York fans want a point guard, and, they feel like they missed out on Zion last year. So they want LaMelo really bad, and I think it would be a good fit for them personally. But, yeah, I mean, I just think because they're not familiar with him, and I think that he will get booed on draft night if he gets picked by the Knicks, especially if, a more recognizable name is sitting in the draft room. But that's just basketball. I mean, I just don't like the fact that guys like Ginobili and Tony Parker and Dirk are never really mentioned as the successes. You hear more about the failures of the guys that were from Europe that didn't make it. And I mean, poor Darko. He's always going to be. I mean, every player is going to be compared to Darko in a sense. I mean, look at Jokic. Jokic is. I mean, he's an All NBA player, and you don't really hear about how successful he's been as a European player compared to an American player that was drafted ahead of him.
That's funny because Jokic will have a great career, I think, but he might not be remembered 25 years after he leaves the game as much as Darko will be remembered.
And did you know that there's there's a connection between the two? Jokic's brother was in Darko's entourage when he came to the States.
Oh, my gosh.
I'd have to send you the article one day. But, yeah, I read it, and I was just crazy that part of the reason why they say Jokic is successful is because his brother spent a lot of time in the States, and he was with Darko, and, they talked about how he struggled fitting in with that Detroit team, and he partied and, just kind of made up for just struggling, adjusting to the culture. And then by the time they got back to Serbia, Jokic is older brother realized that his younger brother had turned into a prospect. And so he moved to dinner with him. But everything that they did with Darko when they were younger, they made sure that they did not do with Jokic. So it's like part of the reason why he transformed his body. And it's an interesting read, just how there's a connection between the two.
Very interesting indeed. Just so he could also advise him what not to do if you were to get in those types of situations. So that actually it's good right there for you. But yes, I mean there's some tough questions and there's some tough things that you can say or you can ask about. But if people get a chance, they need to check out NBA Draft Junkies, your YouTube page, and check out that specific video. And then while they're there, they can also check out all the prospects, but understand why European players. They for a great deal of them, they are playing at somewhat of a competent enough level where they can go ahead and get that platform to succeed in the NBA. It's just amazing the lack of, not understanding, but just the lack of appreciation like we've seen from Kristaps Porzingis, who I knew was going to be a good player. I was actually hoping the Lakers would pick him at number 2 that year he had come out instead of D'Angelo. And things could have played out a little bit differently if that would have been the case. But, it's hindsight's 2020. I just, like I said, European players should be evaluated on a par equal to their American counterparts.
I agree. I think on one hand, I will say it's a little tougher simply because in Europe, some guys don't necessarily get a chance to really play like they would in college. So, I mean, Luka was a guy that he played a lot. So I think you knew what you were getting with him. But I think there are cases where a guy dominated the junior levels. He played on a EuroLeague team, and he did not really get a chance to play. So I think that was the case with Bender. He was drafted highly based off of how he played in the junior teams. But on Maccabi, he didn't really get a lot of minutes. So they didn't really get a chance to compare him or just kind of see how he would compare against NBA-level athletes or grown men. So I think in some cases it may help guys, it may hurt guys, but I feel like there's owners that don't want to take a European player number 1 or number 2. I mean, in my opinion, that's the only reason why Luka fell as far as he did, because I think you heard about Sarver wanting Ayton because of their Arizona connection. But I, in my opinion, and I could be totally wrong, it's just my opinion, but I feel like Divock and the Kings organization were like, we don't necessarily want the backlash if it doesn't work out.
That's the one I'll never figure out with Vlade. I just, he was there. They have a relationship. And even with Phoenix, the coach had a relationship with Luka, and say la vie, more power for the Mavericks. They've got it. They got the pick they wanted, and it's worked out very well for them. So if we can give more love to Europe, or at least better understand when you evaluate these players that are best for your teams as fans out there, just go ahead and not automatically dismiss these European players, because on a lot of occasions they do work out.
Yeah, but it's interesting with my site. If I post a video of a European player, they generally get more views than my American players.
I noticed that. You actually pointed that out to me, and I looked at that, and I'm like, yeah, not even close.
But I think it kind of helps in a sense, because when people are seeing these guys' names on draft boards, there's not a lot of video. While any American prospect, you type their name, you might find videos of them when they were in 9th grade. You might find their OAU clips. You're going to find plenty of people doing their college clips. So the European players aren't as well known. Even in their own country, there's not a lot of YouTube videos. It's not like in the States. Like if you go to a Nike EYBL game, there may be like 9 videographers on the baseline filming. While you go to a Adidas Next Generation tournament game and overseas, and you got a lot of the top high-level European prospects playing in that league, there may not be anybody filming. I mean, there may be a live stream of the game. So I think that's an area where I can probably be effective at, is just having more videos on my site of the European players and maybe helping the American fans become more familiar with them. But I still think just because they're in Europe and there's not a lot of familiarity as far as the name, there's going to be a bias.
We'll be back with more of the Lakers Fast Break podcast. Needing an edge for your fantasy football team? Listen to the guys at Inside Sports Fantasy Football for insight that will help you reach your league championship. That's Inside Sports Fantasy Football. Check it out today on your favorite podcast outlet. Well, there you have it, my friends. You got to go ahead and check out what he's doing today, Mr. Rafael Barlowe, on NBA Draft Junkies, so you get a deeper insight not only on just the European, but also the domestic prospects as they gear up towards the NBA draft. And one thing everybody has to remember in this draft, this is not considered a strong draft. And I want to stress that. So you're going to have to go ahead and do a lot of work as a general manager to find and choose the best fits for your organization, because you don't have the greatest talent pool in the world to draw from.
Well, I'm starting to. I don't want to say it's
not the
draft.
worst draft. It's not the worst draft. It's not 2013. That's probably the lowest one I can remember.
I think 2013 came out with some pretty decent players, if I'm not mistaken. But I just don't know if you're going to get I think 2013 is considered a bad draft because you didn't have a superstar going in the top 5.
Or at least what they thought was no superstars.
Yeah. And so I think with this draft, I think there's going to be quite a few guys that have long careers. It may not be high on, you might not get a Zion or Karl Anthony Towns. You may not have that caliber of player, going early. But at the same time, I think that you're going to have quite a few guys that end up playing 10, 12 years and have long careers and good complementary players. But, drafts are judged by all-stars and superstars. But I feel like there's some drafts where you have 1 or 2 guys that are really, really good, and then you look at the lottery and there's 3 or 4 guys out of the league within 5 years. So I don't know if this draft will have that.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's no better place to check out exactly if any of these players, or all of these players, or many of these players can actually fit the bill for these teams than NBA Draft Junkies. So before we head on out, and before I ask you to share some last thoughts on Jerry Sloan, I want you to go ahead and give everybody an update of what's going on at NBA Draft Junkies.
Pretty much the same, just content. I think now I want to do a little bit more fan interaction on my site. And so that's when I did the video about the European bias, I think there's over 100 people commented. So that's pretty fun to me. I need to do another mock draft, 15 through 30. I should start working on that tonight. I may have it up. Well, I'll definitely have it up before this podcast is on the air. And then from there, I know I have Tyrese Halliburton. I have a video of him coming out soon. I haven't decided who I'll do next. I'm thinking about doing maybe Theo Maledon as another guy that people may not be too familiar with, who was once considered a lottery pick coming into the season. His stock has kind of fallen. So I think that I may do the video of him. I'm trying to decide between him or Jaden McDaniels, somebody that we've talked about on this podcast that I really like, even though the talent and the numbers don't seem to add up. So I want to do a deeper dive into why his production doesn't match his talent and skill set. So I think those are the next 2 guys that I'll do.
I think with Jaden, it's just a matter of here and here. If he wants it and he really wants to go get it, I think it's all about, does he have the motor? Does he have the need? Does he have the desire to go ahead and be successful? Because the talent, to me, what I've seen is definitely there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about his talent and how gifted he is at his height and how he handles the ball. But again, just the production just did not match.
So funny that Washington has gotten all these great, prospects in recent years, but their teams have not ultimately ended up with a successful record. Lorenzo Romar, I think, is the coach that was able to go ahead and recruit all these players, but he's never been able to get them to produce there at a high enough level as what their actual, status had dictated before they entered the NCAA.
Yeah, I don't think Romar recruited the last two guys, Stewart
Okay.
and McDaniels. He's somewhere now. Because remember, he was at Arizona. I think his last year was after Fultz last year.
Okay, because I know he got termed. I didn't know when he got termed.
Yeah. But he did have Chris and Fultz, two guys, back-to-back guys that were lottery picks. And, I don't think they had won a NCAA game in years.
Yeah, so you got to imagine that. I mean, just all this talent going there, just trying to find exactly with these talented players the drive. I mean, it's just seemingly, like you said before with Onyeka Okongwu. It seems like he has that ability, he has that want, he has that desire, but he may not possess enough as much talent as Jaden McDaniel. It's just that dynamic. It's just, do you want it or do you not?
Yeah, I think he's just a late bloomer who. I know he played on he was in the USA basketball circuit, or he did have some hype coming in. But when you think of Chino Hills, you don't think of him. You thought of the Ball brothers, and he was on that team, which is crazy that one team could end up with three guys that are lottery picks on one high school team.
That's amazing. Well, my friend, it's been a great episode. I truly appreciate you taking the time to speak to me. But before we head on out, the late Jerry Sloan, he passed away recently, NBA coach for the Utah Jazz for several years, was a thorn in the Lakers' side because he had such good teams. Never quite got them over the hump as a championship team, but still many years of success, playoff runs for many, many years. He had a lot of great success with and without Stockton and Malone. So I want to hear your thoughts a little bit on Jerry Sloan on the way out.
Yeah, he was a guy that will always be remembered as just a hard-nosed, winning coach. I think there's a little saltiness on how he went out with the whole Darren Williams thing. But I did read that whatever issues that they had, that they ironed them out and they made up for it. So that was good to hear. But I think you always think that he left the game earlier than he was supposed to, and he didn't go on his own terms, because the way the media played it is that he left because he was unhappy with the player. So I didn't like that part of it, because it just seemed like he was kind of forced out, or the new generation of players, he couldn't handle them. But it was, like I said, it was good to hear that whatever issues that they had, they made up, and they were cordial with each other before he passed. And honestly, I just didn't know that I heard he had some health issues, but I didn't know that he had deteriorated to that point. And, you always see him as being the lively, fiery coach of the Jazz, and I just couldn't imagine seeing him not having that same energy. But 2020's been rough. I mean, we've lost 3 Hall of Famers in less than 6 months. So I really hope that there's no more. I don't know if the basketball world can take any more just these untimely deaths, but it was also the timing of it was pretty interesting, because his name had just started coming up again after everybody was watching The Last Dance, and that whole Jazz team was back in our thoughts and our minds. And then a week later, he passes. But basketball legend, obviously a Hall of Famer. He's loved in Chicago and Utah, so he played most of his career in Chicago. So it's just another tough loss for the basketball world and community, but he was a great coach.
Yes, he was, and he should always be remembered, like you said, as a great player and a great coach, and his contributions to basketball should never be understated. We're going to miss Jerry Sloan as he passed away this week at the age of 78. 2020 has been a definite rough year, my friend, but we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it together. Everybody listening out there, please stay healthy, stay safe. You too, my friend. Please stay healthy and stay safe. I'm going to talk to you soon, hopefully as soon as we can. You're going to go ahead and preview the Western Conference to see if anybody can go ahead and go and maybe match up against the Lakers or the Clippers. I definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. It's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, as we get closer and closer to an NBA season. Hopefully 8 to 10 weeks away. We're thinking that might happen because we're hearing the rumors a little bit louder and louder and louder. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely willing to hear your thoughts again, as much as you want to give them. And not only on that, the NBA draft, that also has to be solidified at some point in time. So we're definitely looking forward to hearing more thoughts on that and your thoughts on basketball and life period. It's just so great to have you on the show, and I cannot thank you enough for being part of the Lakers Fast Break podcast.